So whenever you're ready.
I'm ready, Freddie. Let's go.
Okay, board, you guys ready? All right. If you would join me in welcoming Dr. Mark Peterson to Jacksonville.
Thank you.
Before we get started, just kind of some logistics. We're trying to keep this thing to an hour and a half if possible, and we've allotted 2 hours at the worst case scenario. So, Miss Lisa, would you mind if we get to like 45 minutes and we're still on the first question, let me know, okay? Move forward. I believe you've met the board, and in case you haven't, if everyone would just introduce themselves.
Good evening, I'm Kelly Pierce.
Great.
Emily Sims.
David Glass.
Steve Smith.
And Mike Poe.
Good evening.
Good evening. Let's see, before we go into the questions, I know we have 20 questions set up, and there's a board member that's assigned to each question. If you want to, just give us a brief review of your educational and work history.
Okay. To start off, my name is Mark Peterson. I have worked in several places in Georgia and in South Carolina. My education began in Minnesota. Received a bachelor's degree in elementary education at the University of Minnesota Duluth. Next was a master's degree at North Georgia College. They've changed that name to North Georgia College and State University, which is over in Dahlonega, Georgia. Following there, I went to University of Georgia.
Roll
Tide. I'm just waiting for the and received received a specialist and a doctorate degree from the University of Georgia. I have been married 33 years to my wife. We have one child. He is a 15-month-old bulldog. I guess I can say that the children that are in our life are the school children. Our life is the school, and the things that go on at the school is what we're involved in. Somebody had asked me a while back what my hobbies were. Well, school. I mean, kids, activities. I've worked in several places in Georgia. I was a teacher in Gilmer County, which is in LJ. I taught elementary school, 4th grade, and taught high school math. Following that, I was assistant principal for 4.5 years in Habersham County. Following that, I was a principal for 4.5 years at Commerce City, the small independent school system. Following there, I went to Pickens County as a middle school principal. I had this vision in my head that I wanted to be a superintendent. So 275 in a middle school wasn't going to be enough to show somebody that I had what it took to be a superintendent. So I went to Pickens County Middle School, over 1,000 students at a middle school. Those of you that work in the middle school, you understand what I'm saying when I talk about different kinds of environments. From there, I had an opportunity to go to South Georgia, superintendent in a small district, 650 students, grades 6 through 12 in the same building, very similar to where we're headed here. From there, I went to McDuffie County, which is Thompson, Georgia, and was superintendent there for 5 years. Finished up my 30 years, and in Georgia, you could retire after 30 years, so I did. I retired one day and started a new job as superintendent in South Carolina the very next day, and I've been at that job for 6 years. And now I'm sitting here anxiously awaiting an opportunity to be called back for Jacksonville City. I've seen some great things today. I've seen a lot of adults caring for boys and girls. It's all about boys and girls, and that's, to me, the most exciting part.
Well, thank you. We've got 20 questions here, like I said before, and we'd like to go ahead and get started with those. The board member will ask the question, and then after your answer, if there's any follow-up, we'll just go flow along that way. Steve, I believe you had the first question.
Okay, thanks, David. Dr. Peterson, as a superintendent of a school system, a large portion of the day is devoted to making numerous decisions that involve multiple stakeholders. Describe your decision-making style and provide a few examples of strategies you have used in different situations with various stakeholders.
Well, what you say there is very truthful. It's decision-making from the first time you might get a call before you're even on campus, all the way until you go to bed at night. I'm a decision maker. I'm a problem solver. But I don't shoot from the hip when it comes to making decisions. I try to find as much information as I can about the situation. There are even times that I've had to sleep on it overnight because I wanted to make sure that the decision that I made was correct. I've even called mentors that I have to run issues by them just to make sure that I've thought about everything. So I'm not quick to make a decision, but once we make a decision, we certainly are strong enough to be able to hang on to that. In 14 years of being a superintendent, there are numerous times where we had to deal with various stakeholders. Greenwood 52, which is where I was before I came here. Competitive cheer was a desire of numerous girls and some parents, and we sat down and we had lots of conversations about that. Obviously there's a financial piece, there's a regular cheerleading versus competitive cheer. I certainly didn't want to develop a caste system, if you will, that some girls are better than others. It's just a different style of cheerleading, and they have different rules. South Carolina High School League has rules that apply to that as well. In other words, you've got to be a regular cheerleader, a support or a spirit cheerleader, if you will. If you're going to be on competitive cheer, they wear their regular cheerleading outfits to do competitive cheer. So we really had to get around the table and talk about why and what fors and funding and those kinds of things. And the last step is we asked them to go ahead and bring that and make a presentation to the board so they're fully aware of what they're asking to do. There were some that wanted to make it into a club and kind of see how that went for a while. Once they brought the information, I made the decision that yes, we'll try competitive cheer. And their first year of being competitive cheerleaders, they were 5th in the state, which was pretty good. So they had to do some things prior to. They did a lot of gymnastics, and they had some of that prep time that they had to work on. But I was real pleased. One of the things that we did to be able to gauge an interest, not only in that, but in other things, is that I did a survey of all the students, grades 6 through 12, and see what kinds of things we didn't have that they'd be interested in. And after the survey, we ended up doing we did competitive cheer. We started FFA, Future Farmers of America. We did a fishing team. We added C-team baseball. So trying to get a gauge from students, and I like to spend a lot of time with students. I'll eat lunch with them and spend time in the cafeteria. As a matter of fact, today we went both cafeterias and kind of get a little sense of what was going on there. But you just got to be able to get them all around the table and answer all the questions. You don't want to ignore any facet of making one of those decisions. So I like to make a decision based on all the information I can gather.
Thank you.
Anybody have follow-up to that? I had one follow-up. In one of the letters of recommendation, one of the board members had mentioned that even when you make a decision that didn't work out, you just move forward and make the change you need to make. And I think that's important because you don't always know if it's going to work or not when you make a decision.
That's true, and I'll just be honest with you. I'm sure that there are decisions that I've made that weren't the right ones, and I've backed up. I've apologized. I'm sorry. I'm man enough to do that. This is not about Mark, and this is not about position or anything. This is about what is it that I can do to make a difference and create the environment for boys and girls, and that's been helpful.
Any other follow-up? Okay, Mike, I think you're next.
All right, again, welcome to Jacksonville. I appreciate your interest in our system.
My question is, explain how you would develop a school system budget and tell us who you would involve and how you would involve them in that process.
Budgets. I made a comment to somebody this afternoon, having done budgets in Georgia and South Carolina. Georgia was relatively straightforward. South Carolina, some of my colleagues have been there for 30 years and still can't get their arms around South Carolina school system budget. Alabama budgets are very similar to Georgia, so that's going to be a little bit simpler. You've got to create budgets, and I start the process of thinking of budgets based on needs. Now, if you will go talk to some principals, they kind of are fuzzy between needs and wants. And so, having been a principal, I understand that process, and I know the difference between needs and wants. Who's involved? I think everybody and everybody. We start off, and we look at the expenditures on first, because you're not going to get your revenues till down the road. So we want to look at, and 80% of your budget is going to be personnel. You have some packets in front of you, two of them in particular, that deal with creating a budget. And I took those specifically from McDuffie County, which is where I was 6 years ago. And I think it's very straightforward in there who is involved. We start out 10 months out, and we look at last year's budget. Now, that's not any zero-based budgeting, but you have a lot of departments that have monetary, financial responsibilities. So everybody's got not everybody, those department heads have budgets. And so they look at what they've had in the past several years, and you'll see some charts in there. And this year they got this, and next year they got this, and next year they got this. And you'll even see in several of those pages that there were some cuts. Cuts down 5% and 20% of their budgets. Certainly, there are some parts of a budget that are non-changeable. You got personnel, and you got state laws requiring a certain number of personnel for a certain number of children. But everybody has their budget. We sit around the table and we look at it and we hash out, find what is needed, what is not. Software, technology, financial office, my office. That's why we start out 10 months. So October 1 is budget. You're looking back in January to start this process. They all get a template with their budget on it from last year, and they work on that, and we meet probably every 2 weeks until we can get a budget that expenditure-wise is where it needs to be. As far as cutting budget, obviously, when you're short, you got to find some places to cut it. The last place that I want to cut is in the classroom. So where do we start? And you'll see in that particular budget that we took 20% off of district administration. People and their expenditures were cut 20%. I didn't answer the question as fully as probably it needed to be, and that's why I've got those examples right there to show you how that was done to include everybody. We have budget hearings just like y'all do. But I think we need to have a meeting with the board to explain where the money comes from, the expenditures, why it's the way it is. I need to educate y'all. Just like everybody else, we have professional development in the schools. We need to educate y'all as well.
Thank you.
Any follow-up?
I had a follow-up, but he answered it.
Okay. All right, Ms. Kelly, you're next.
Okay, what experience do you have with incorporating technology with teaching and learning, such as our One to World initiative? Second part, how would you annually evaluate the effectiveness of teaching and learning with technology?
Obviously, teaching and learning is the main thing we do, and that's very important and very critical. 3 years ago, in our district, we had iPad carts, and I think that was the start to a non-funded one-to-one. And we had a cart in every school, and you just can't spread it out. Last year, we started and we went through a Google Chromebooks, and we piloted some things there. We got $1 million to be able to upgrade our infrastructure, our technology, using Chromebooks. Obviously, your wireless had to be updated, and that's what we spent that money on, and we started getting classroom carts of Google Chromebooks. Our AP got to pilot those. This year, I think they expanded it even further. I think a one-to-one, or in this case, a one-to-world, these children need to have access to the technology tools, and that's what they are. They are not a replacement for the teacher. We go out to the mall on the weekends, and you will see children using their phones to find answers to questions and stuff, and we've got to get them acclimated. Another thing which is a little bit different than this is the way we're presenting this instruction. We're still doing a lot of things that we did 50 years ago, called the sage on the stage, and giving them information. We need to be able to do hands-on. We need to do project-based learning. We need to engage kids more than we have in the past. How many of you have heard of Rita Pearson? Rita Pearson is an awesome lady, but she did die a couple of months ago. But the little TED Talk that she did talked about every child needs a champion. And one of the comments that she had in there is she said, children don't learn from people they don't like. We're going to make sure that we're engaged, that we engage these students, that we build relationships with these students. That's one of the focuses that I have to make sure. Leadership is about building relationships. Teaching is about building relationships, and I think we need to be able to have some of that. Back to the question. I know, I was deviating. I'm sorry. Using them for games and some of that stuff. And I know games is a viable use, but we need to be able to have what's the words I'm looking for? A strategic plan to use these iPads in an appropriate manner for whether we're going to teach them to do research on these or whatever the case might be. We've got to have something substantive that they're doing with these. Now, I was in a couple of places today and I saw them using these iPads in an appropriate fashion. I spend a lot of time in classrooms and hallways and talking to kids, and I think that's how I personally determine whether or not we're using things in the appropriate way. I'm sure there are surveys and some things that we can give to teachers and to students to determine the validity of using these, but there's no question in my mind that we not only need to use these, but we need to expand what it is we're doing. I think that's critical.
Thank you.
Any follow-up? I had one follow-up. Could you touch just briefly on, in your application, you mentioned the media class and a morning show at one of the places you were, I can't remember which school it was at, but touch base on that a little bit as to your feelings towards, I think the way it was worded is you brought back the morning show as it relates to student engagement.
We got to create lots of niches for lots of kids. I mentioned to somebody this afternoon that this evening on my way home, I'll be watching football games on the NFHS, and to get students to be able to do that. It's primary school. They didn't do that for a long time, and I think that's an engagement piece that we need to get kids involved in. At all of the schools, we had a morning show, whether it be through the intercom or through the video system. Again, that's technology, that costs money, that's trying to get a little bit at a time. But I thought that was critical for students to get back on that.
Thank you.
Welcome to Jacksonville.
Thank you.
I have to remember, when you mentioned Rita Pearson's name, It just brought me back to a framework for understanding poverty, and I was fortunate enough for my system when I was working for Jacksonville City Schools to send me to a training with Ruby Payne in a framework for understanding poverty. When I first heard her, one of the things that came past me was the fact that this quote by James Cromer that basically said no significant relationship, without no significant learning occurs without significant relationship. Basically, that's what you're saying.
Yes.
So it takes relationships, for growth, for learning, for all that to occur.
Absolutely.
So my question is, superintendents understand that at the end of the day, student growth and achievement is ultimately what matters. Describe your experience in developing, implementing, and evaluating curriculum and instructional programs to raise student achievement.
Teaching and learning, that's the most important work that we do. As we know, and these are some bad words, Common Core, does that name ring a bell? Common Core. If I could make a comment about Common Core has been given a runaround about government forcing us down to forcing us to use certain things, but if I can explain to you Common Core in terms of football language, is that all right? Sure. Common Core says that it takes 10 yards for a first down. Agreed? How we do that, run, pass, pitch, whatever, is what schools do. Nobody's shoving anything down our throats. Does that make sense? So when people talk about Common Core and they're forcing us to do this and do it, that's not right. The local school business deals with, is that correct? We make those decisions, or we make those curriculum decisions. I could make decisions about curriculum all day long, but I'm not in front of classroom all day. I think we need to give the opportunity for those that are with those children all day, every day, to make those kinds of curriculum and instructional decisions. Now, I'm around in the classrooms enough to know what best practices are being used, what technology is being used, and I think that teachers know when they're using practices that really don't work. And I think we need to give them the flexibility to be able to do the things that work. And if there are some things that don't work, you need to let us know so we can make some adjustments. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, and the second part of the question was basically how do you involve faculty in this decision-making process? So can you speak maybe something specifically about how you involve them besides providing flexibility?
As faculty meetings are held in buildings, I come on a regular basis to be able to answer questions and to be able to help them. I think that their leadership teams, that's how they make decisions at the schools. This is not a Mark to do. I mean, this is not doing it because Mark said so. We want to make our schools the best we can make them, and that goes to those teachers making the decisions. And does that mean that's site-based management? Well, I think a lot of it is. But what we need to do is to make sure that they've got input and they've got say-so. I've been around a lot of places that force things to happen with teachers that don't need to happen. I'm a collaborative person, and it takes all of us to get the job done. This is not Mark.
Okay, any follow-up? Okay. We'll move on to number 5, that's mine. Do you believe that extracurricular involvement leads to better academic performance and student motivation? If so, how would you evaluate extracurricular offerings and fund them?
Absolutely, positively. Every child needs to have an outlet of some kind. What better outlets than activities at the school that they're being supervised by our adults, our teachers, our staff. Funding is another issue. The survey that I did with those students a couple of years ago was an attempt to be able to determine what other things that they're interested in. We've added several things in the past. Funding is kind of a tough issue. Do you got to pay another coach? Do you got to buy some equipment? All kinds of things are needed, but we've got to create lots of niches for lots of kids. Not everybody can play football. Not everybody can competitively cheer. What about debate? What about literary? What about chorus? What about band? I mean, there's all kinds of activities for children. I'd rather them do them under our supervision than on the streets. It also motivates kids. And I think recognition of students and their performance, whether it be extracurricular, whether it be academic, whether it be behaviorally, are some things that I think that we need to do, and to recognize those kids and adults as well. I remember the day that we had put students' stars on the wall with their pictures, and the number of children who went home and brought their parents back in to see they had their picture and name on the wall. Phenomenal. We need to recognize them. And sports and activities and those kinds of things, Beta Club and whatever else, are recognizing kids for their performance.
I had one follow-up in the application. I noticed that there was a comment about every 9 weeks. It was almost like a academic pep rally. Thought that was interesting.
I've been involved in Johnston's Renaissance for over 20 years. They're the ones that do the rings and the invitations and graduation stuff. 1994, I went to a national conference. I was invited to go. And so I went, and it's probably the most phenomenal professional development I've ever been on. And I've gone for 20 years to their national conference. And it's all about recognizing students, recognizing the adults. Those things that get recognized get done again and again and again. I have watched the culture in school districts improve significantly with the recognition of students and the adults in the building. It's phenomenal. It changed the culture. I saw a bunch of that today at the high school. Sure did.
Any follow-up? Thank you. Mike,
Okay.
I think you're up.
Yes. As superintendent, how would you measure the progress or success of our school system from year to year, and how would you share this information?
There is a example of a balanced scorecard that we've used in the past. This one happens to be from an elementary school. It's got it's a colored chart. I think, and I'm a chart and data guy, I think we need to be able to look at the metrics that we've got. And I know the state requires us to take certain tests and we get grades and those kinds of things, but I think we need to look and drill down as far down as we can go and measure those things, and to be able to promote those things, and to find the things that we're weak in and fix those. If you don't have a chart, or you just have got a blanket statement, oh, we're doing pretty good, you don't know where to improve, and we've got to improve. We're not number one yet. And I think that's a great example to be able to use that balanced scorecard. And what that is, you've got 3, 4, 5 goals, whatever you've decided, and then you've got objectives for each one, how you measure those. And so those are there, and they're color-coded. Yellow means you're staying the same. Red, you're going backwards, and green is you're moving forward. And I think that does a great job of showing numerically and metric-wise how you're doing. Now, is that the all to beat all? No. If you look at Madison City's page on the front, they've got metrics listed on the front, Madison City. And I sent him some information the other day and asked him what kind of software he was using, because it was marvelous. And he said that was homegrown. So I'll find a way to make that happen. But if you look on the front, it shows a lot of information and several charts on the front. That's Madison City. But we need to be able to do that, and we need to be able to share that. Historically, I've put the balanced scorecards on our webpage. As a matter of fact, I've put my evaluations on my webpage. I mean, that's public knowledge. Let's get everybody we can supporting the school district. And by doing that, I think you're being transparent, and I like to be transparent and above board. Plus the fact, if you've got weaknesses, what better way than to be able to show the public that you've got some weaknesses, and how about helping us?
Thank you.
Any follow-up? Okay, Ms. Kelly, number 7.
What is your approach to discipline, and how would you ensure that students have a safe, secure, and orderly environment for learning and participating in extracurricular activities?
It's kind of a twofold question there. I'm kind of hard on crime and discipline. I think that part of our job here at school is to be able to teach these children not only to behave here, but I think they need to be able to learn how to behave out in the real world. Won't be long, and they're going to be out there. One of the questions I asked this afternoon is that these breeches that are down, you know, and you've got the underwear showing. Somebody found out that was not appropriate, and they found a solution to fix that. I know today was Friday day, and I know it was football day or whatever else, but I didn't see any underwear today. So I was very pleased with that. There are city councils that are banning, what do they call that? Sagging. All I know is it's underwear hanging out of the breeches. It just, to me, is not appropriate, and we don't need to have that. But back to my point, I'm kind of hard on crime. Several years ago, when I was assistant principal, I created, again, charts, data, and there was a code of conduct that was there. And I read through your code of conduct, and there's nothing wrong with your code of conduct, but I want to make sure that parents understand what the code of conduct says. If principals, assistant principals have a variety of alternatives to do, and if Johnny does it today and you dispense of it this way, and Susie does it tomorrow and you dispense with it another way because they've got an option. The code of conduct that I've got there, not saying that yours is wrong, but it made my life so much easier as an assistant principal when I created it. Here's the offense. Here's the first time, this is what happens. Here's the second time, here's what happens. Third time, here's how it happens. And I've given you an example of that just to kind of show you that most things are covered, and what we do is we ask our administrators to keep a log throughout the year, and if they run into loopholes, that we can adjust it and have the board approve it for the following year. I think it served us very well. We have in the past used a hearing officer for those students who needed to be placed in alternative school or expelled. There are several places in the chart where students will be arrested. I think we need to be able to set the example, be consistent, be fair. An example about fair was a cartoon that I saw the other day, and it had 3 children looking over the fence, and they were all different sizes, and they hoisted the children and put them on boxes, and they said, "Is this fair?" They all still couldn't see over the fence. So what they did in the next slide was to adjust that so that all of them could see over the fence. Now that's fair, and that's equal. And I think we need to be consistent. We need to be fair to our students. How many of you have more than one child at home? Do you treat them the same, or do you treat them fair? You treat them fair. You know as well as I do, in many of our cases, we have children on both ends of the spectrum. So we have to you can't treat them all the same. But you got to be fair and you got to be consistent, and I think we can do that with a code of conduct that looks like that. If I can follow up with that, and I mentioned this a couple of different times, that I've spent a lot of time in the buildings, and I'm there to help and to facilitate and to what is it that I can do to help? It's not, I don't live in a gotcha world, never have, never will. I work on building relationships with teachers, administrators, parents. I mentioned to Mr. Neighbors earlier today that once I started going in those schools, my phone calls went down drastically because we're taking care of business at the point of the child, and I think that's critical. When I walk into a building and students call me by name, I've done my job.
Okay. Any follow-up? All right, I think I've got number 8. Would you recommend implementing a program that you strongly feel would benefit students, even if funding the program would require dipping into local fund reserves? And as a follow-up, what level of reserve funds do you think our system should seek to maintain as a floor?
Maybe. Is that on the fence enough? Part of my job is not only to identify those things that aren't working and to stop those things and to find things that are working to move them along. But our job is to be able to do the best we can for boys and girls, to be able to facilitate, whether it be the resources or whatever else that our teachers need. And I've got to educate everybody. I've got to educate the board. I've got to build a relationship. If I were to secure this position, it doesn't mean automatically that I get all the trust that I need to have. I've got to earn that. And I think by being transparent, being fair, doing the things that I need to do to benefit boys and girls, I think that would help. Back to the maybe. How much bang for the buck? You know, just because it works in 96, is it going to work here? Not necessarily. All of it is based on needs. If we've got some needs that we need to accomplish, if we've got some improvements we need to do, how about if we pilot a little bit and try it for little or no money to see if that's going to work? I spend a good bit of time communicating with board via Friday. I have Friday emails that I send out. And in those emails, it's really my log for the week. People I've talked to, the phone calls that I've gotten, the conversations and meetings that I've been in at the schools, that kind of stuff, because if you're asked about it and you don't know, that doesn't make you look real good. But I think this is a team effort, and we all got to be on the same page. And frankly, I don't have all the answers, I'm sorry. Never will have all the answers, so I think we can work together to, if there's something I think is going to work, I'll bring it to you. And hopefully over a period of time, I've developed the trust that you say, well, you know, that's a good idea. Let's give it a try. I'm hoping that our employees over a very short period of time would give me the trust that I need to have based on earning it, not just saying that I need to have the trust. We're all going to work in this together to do what's best for boys and girls. And again, I don't have all answers, but maybe.
Okay. I wrote that down. Any follow-up on that? Okay.
We got a little follow-up question here about as much money in reserve. I'd like to have 3 months in reserve. I mean, I think if you have one, if you got something happens, a leaky roof or something like that, you're going to have to pull in to pay for it. So I'd like to have 3, and frankly, I'd like to grow that. That doesn't mean to the city or anywhere else that we've got enough money that we need. But, you know, it's kind of like our own savings accounts and bank accounts. I mean, you put some money up for rainy days. Is this a rainy day? Well, it might be, you know.
Okay, thank you. Emily?
This next question is a two-parter, and I think it'll be best served to ask it in 2 parts. The first one is, how would you evaluate the effectiveness of teachers and administrators?
I can walk into, and I think most people can, walk into a classroom and see teachers on the floor with their children working with, what was that thing that they had today that I was going to get for my dog? Sphero. That's an example of, you know, they're on the floor working with the kid. I mean, if they're engaged, if the kids are engaged, I think those are your teachers that you really want to kind of hold up and applaud and share and show. And I think we have a ton of those teachers that I've seen today being involved like that. Administrators, I spend time with administrators. I develop the relationship with that. It's a we deal, not a Mark deal. It's a we deal. And you can tell administrators that are there for themselves instead of for boys and girls. Relationship building, I've said it over and over and over again, but I think it's a critical piece in leading a building or leading a district or teaching a class. You've got to be able to develop those relationships. It's critical.
So the second part of the question is, describe an experience you've had with an ineffective teacher or administrator and tell us how you resolved the issue.
In 14 years of working with principals and teachers, I've had many occasions to be able to provide some encouragement, some remediation for these individuals. There's two kinds of people. There's those that can't and those that won't. Those that won't don't need to stay. They need to go. And those that can't need to be taught how. And that's where I come in and principals come in to be able to provide some remediation. I don't live in a gotcha world, as I said a little while ago. This is something that we do. If there are some documentations and some pieces that are not working together, and frankly, those people know that they're not doing the job. This is not a surprise, not a shock. Principals have conversations with ineffective teachers every day. But is it that's not our goal to say, see you. What can we do to help? And I've had several. I'll give you an example of a situation where a teacher was reported to have tied a child in a chair. Well, obviously that was not appropriate, and so we investigated and we had conversations with the adults, with the students that were there. We had some professional development. We had some at-home time. Within a month, she resigned and left the district. But you've got to address those kinds of issues. I think it's very clear of those individuals not doing the things that they need to do, that are harming students or not working full-time, if I can use those words.
Okay, any follow-up? All right, number 10, Mr. Steve.
Describe your management style and what methods you have found to be most effective in supervision and building rapport with administrators and employees.
My management style is a collaborative style. I am not a dictator. We don't live in a gotcha world. I'm a servant leader. I'll go into schools, I'll be in the district office and ask how I can help and facilitate. How can I mentor? I know that there are some possibilities of some different administrators or in a different organization with the high school and the elementary school. I want to be able to be part of that, to be able to make that a successful venture. I'm very, very child-focused. I'm a collaborative leader. I'm a relationship-building leader. That's how I build rapport with administrators and teachers. I'm visible. I'm around. Takes a little while for our staff to understand that all I want to do is help. And I'm not there as a gotcha. Especially if that's not been what's been happening in the past. So.
Thanks.
Hey, can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
All right. So you talk about building relationships with your administrators and employees. What about between administrators and employees? How would you seek to support that or encourage that?
I think, one, I'm a role model for them to be able to watch and to see. There are times that I can do some teaching with our administrators to help them develop those relationships with their staff. Teaching school is hard work. I think anybody likes to be appreciated on their job. And I think by recognizing and rewarding good behavior, by rewarding extra work. We have teachers all across this district who spend their own pocket money for school supplies. They work above and beyond an 8-hour day. Teachers are absolutely wonderful folks that don't get enough appreciation. The media kills them each and every day, and it just breaks my heart. I've been there and I've done that, and I know that it's hard work. And whatever I can do to facilitate them feeling good about the job that they're doing, that's what I want to do.
You prompted another follow-up. So aside from financial incentives, how would you show appreciation and reward to these people going above and beyond?
Well, we'd like to be able to say that money is the answer, but I will tell you that teachers as a whole can get excited about the smallest kind of something. Pencils and stuff in their mailbox and T-shirts. I mean, I've been there and done that. That doesn't mean that financial rewards can't be put in a pot. You know, we might need to look district-wide at how can we reward our folks financially, whether it be a lunch out instead of having to be in the cafeteria with our children. I mean, just small teachers. Am I right? Appreciation. And it would be great to do that, but in a small district, the funding is not necessarily there. And that's where your partnerships with your businesses and industry can come in. I think they can provide some of that, whether it be some of your banks or whatever else. It may be that we can get a bank to provide steaks for the school, and we provide steaks for the teachers on their birthday. I mean, you talk about some eyes opening up. I mean, just little things. And that's what we got to do.
Any other follow-up? All right, number 11, Mike.
In a hypothetical classroom where a concept has been taught and 1/3 of the students have not grasped the concept, 1/3 of the students have partially grasped the concept, and 1/3 of the students have mastered the concept, what are your expectations about how to manage the pace of teaching and learning in this classroom?
We're going to have to go back. We're going to have to understand what it is what problems we've got. Not everybody's going to learn the first time you go through. The other thing we got to look at is what kind of instructions being given. Is it sage on the stage and they're spouting information that students have got to pick up and take notes and go? Are they engaged? Students that are engaged, it's very clear, literature is clear that those that are engaged are learning better than those otherwise that are taking the information. I guess who is it? Bob Eaker, Dufour, talks about that in the literature, talks about those students that are not performing up to level. Number one, you've got to identify that they're not. And two, how do you make them learn what they haven't learned so far? You can't move on. I think you may have to group them. I taught 4th grade for 7 years, and I had at least 3 groups most all day to be able to do some differentiation so that the kids could pick up what they needed. We can't teach like we did 50 years ago. Got to make some changes. But you can't move on either. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
So your expectation is that students would be taught, those different groups would be taught at their own pace and not move on, but also not hold back for the ones who had mastered. And so how would you ensure that these expectations are met in the classroom?
I think one, visitation. I think we need to do some data charting. I think we look at report card grades, we look at test grades, and we look at state testing. I think we talk to the teacher. I mean, every teacher that I know of knows where their children are in a particular class. This is not necessarily from the student perspective, but from the teacher perspective, I think. Just because you put it out there doesn't mean they've learned it. You got to do some formative kind of stuff regular to make sure that they've picked up on it. How about Kahoot? Anybody use Kahoot? That's a good one. What about Socrative? That's a good one. So formatives, ticket out the door, those kinds of things to be able to see who has and who's not. There may be some elective classes that students are taking that they can come back in and pick up some extra instruction. You can do a zero class before school starts where students can pick up some extra. That's what we started in this past 2 years ago. Middle school students needed some extra help, and so from 10 minutes to 8 until 8:20, they went in those content rooms to get 30 minutes of extra help, and it really was beneficial.
Thank you.
I had one follow-up to that. Could you go into a little bit of description about the middle college that was on your resume?
We had a partnership with Piedmont Tech, and they have dual enrollment classes where our students from the high school would go over to Piedmont Tech and take classes, and they had to pay for books. We got a program started where they would come on our campus, send their teachers, and it would be a cost of $50 per credit hour. And if students started as juniors, they could have, with the exception of 2 classes during one summer, they could have an associate's degree before they got their high school diploma. You talk about saving parents $20,000. It's awesome. And those children that have gone through that start their college career after they graduate from high school as juniors. They've saved money. They've already been trained in studying. Worked out really well.
Thank you. Number 12, Ms. Emily.
This is kind of looping back to your theme of relationships. As the face of a school system, a superintendent is charged with working collaboratively with faculty and staff, students, parents, community members, business leaders alike in varying capacities. Describe a situation where you've worked with people who have had strong differences of opinion.
Collaboratively, building relationships, working with everybody. Everybody's around the table. This particular issue has come up recently in the news. I don't know if y'all are familiar with it or not, but we had a Confederate issue that's been popping up lately, especially in South Carolina. And there's several school districts that have banned that apparel and that kind of stuff. 2001, I was superintendent in South Georgia, and South Georgia is a little different place than most places. I learned how to eat boiled peanuts and learned how to get mosquitoes away. There was a community that was really Confederate flag-ish there, and they believe that they can wear that and use that and whatever else. And we had a board policy that said that Confederate apparel was not appropriate. And so they were very strong supporters of using Confederate attire, and so I had to meet with them separately. I had to meet with the others separately, and finally we brought them back together. And I guess the real issue happened to be that there were some of the Confederate attire that was disrespectful to a section of people. And so we identified that what was offensive was not allowed, and the board had changed their mind about blanket covering, saying Confederate apparel was not appropriate. So we had to identify, and we did, and that was a pretty tough time. And everybody, when you have strong opinions like that, trying to get them to see the other side is just tough. But you work at it, and you meet, and you're adults, and that works out. That's not the only one I've had.
Well, in retrospect, is there anything you would have done differently in that situation?
I probably would have gone back to the board and see if I could get them to change that policy on the front end. I think there were a lot of feelings might have been hurt as the process went through. I'm not saying that it was wrong, but the thing I thought was good is we were all around the table at different times, and we all understood what the other one was talking about, and then finally bringing them together and finding a solution to the issue. And I'm a problem solver, so let's see if we can get that done.
Just out of curiosity, so you decided that there was Confederate stuff that was okay to wear, or?
Yes.
And then there was some that
Yes.
was offensive?
There were some that was directly offensive to a certain group of people. And we identified what that was, and that turned out to be okay by those people that wanted to wear that particular group, because we separated the offensive stuff from the other. We drilled down and found out what the problems were and worked on that.
But there was some that you thought that the system or the group thought wasn't offensive, so you could wear those?
That's correct. That's correct.
I had one follow-up also. I was reading through, and you'd mentioned that you increased the number of student, parent, teacher conferences. Is that something you try to maximize, and how do you, there's not enough time in the day.
No, there's not. We ended up creating some parent conference days. And we asked all of those from primary and elementary school for all of the children's parents to come in and meet with their teacher. And those that were failing a class in middle school and high school to come in and meet with the teacher. Since that time, we had created early release days to do some professional development, and we used some of those days as well for parent conferences. We thought it was critical. We've got to get our parents in there. That's part of the puzzle.
Thank you. Ms. Lisa, we're doing okay? All right. Number 13, I believe that's mine. As school board members, we're charged with making sure three things. There's a clear vision for the school, resources are allocated to achieve the vision, and there's accountability where it is clear if goals are achieved. How would you address vision, resources, accountability in a system that has high standards, high expectations, and high achievers? And there's a second part to that. How would you respond to a system that expects top 5 results?
I think if we're not reaching for the top, I think we're not doing our job. Your district has had those high standards, high expectations, and you do have high achievers, and you've had those for a long time. And talking about the vision and the resources and the accountability, several years ago, when Duck Dynasty was big, we had to do a theme, and we were Wildcats. So we created Wildcat Dynasty. And there's a 2 or 3 page piece that you've got there. And there are 10 items that we identified were critical items that we needed to discuss, not only in our classrooms, but we needed to behave in a way that those 10 items were brought out to the forefront. In between, once a month, we ended up having a Wildcat Dynasty Day, and we wore our shirts and all that kind of stuff. But I found links, for example. Let's see, can we pull out that Wildcat Dynasty? I don't know that I have a piece right here. That's it. That's it. What is number 1, Mike?
Communication is key.
Okay. What's number 2?
Strong, positive relationships.
Okay. So it's those kinds of issues, and every month we dealt and we talked about and we modeled one of those 10. And I went on and I got links to items that people could read, our staff could read, and we had several meetings throughout the year that incorporated that. If I look at your mission statement, it talks about excellence is the standard, producing graduates of superior academic and social development through delivery of an effective and innovative curriculum by a caring staff, an environment that fosters self-confidence, high expectations, and responsible citizenship. That's what Wildcat Dynasty was. again, going back to relationships, you got a caring staff, outstanding. Self-confidence, academic and social development. I don't know that I've answered that question, but we've got to hold our folks accountable. We've got to set the goal. You're not going to make it if you don't shoot for it. And I think that was another reason why I was attracted to Jacksonville, was because of the high expectations and the high achievers.
Someone have follow-up?
I was just going to kind of mention, in your educational philosophy, you make the statement, a major role for me is keeping the district vision alive and energized. And then you go on to say, holding the energy of the vision is in a creative and flexible environment is essential for any leadership team to be successful. So can you explain to me a little bit more about what you mean by creative and flexible environment in relation to the vision?
I think that when you say things like, you say anything, and to hold it in a box. I think there are things that we can, if you talk about your mission, and there are many things that can relate to that. So in other words, it's not what Mark says or one person says about your vision. It's what it means to me and what it means to y'all, maybe some different things, but it's all the same thing. If you and I were to go out and look at my white truck, it's got Georgia Bulldog stickers on it, and you describe it from one side and I describe it from the other, we're still talking about my truck, but it's from different perspectives, and I think that's the creative and flexibility that I was talking about.
Okay, number 14.
With funding tight, teachers, administrators, and support staff have taken on more and more responsibilities. What would you do to keep them encouraged and their morale up?
I'm going to have to go back to our, we called it a Renaissance program, teacher recognition, employee recognition, pencils in the box, T-shirts. I mean, we see coaches all over who are wearing the T-shirts and the jackets and that kind of stuff. When are we going to take the excitement for the athletics and roll it over to the academic side? I think it's something we need to do, and I think recognition is a piece of that. You walk into a high school and ask them to show you what it is we're recognizing students for, and you got an athletic table that's piled high, and you got an academic, well, you got certificates. We need to do more than that. We need to share and have the excitement for the academic piece. We're here for the academics. The other is here as a secondary piece.
There's a second part to that question.
Okay.
Regarding teacher recruitment, what is your definition of a highly effective teacher, and how would you recruit teachers that fit this description to our system?
Teacher recruitment. I mentioned earlier that going through some of your classrooms and seeing teachers on the floor engaging kids, that is a piece of that, highly effective. Teachers that care for children are highly effective. Experienced, sharing teachers are highly effective. Teachers that students love are effective teachers. How would I recruit those? You know, I think our people are our best PR people. If we're bringing in the top scores and we are the best in the neighborhood, that's going to be able to recruit. Folks are going to be knocking down our doors to come in. On my Twitter page, I've got something. We need to build schools where parents are knocking down the door to get in instead of knocking down the door to get out. I think that's the same way with employees. I think our employees are our best spokespeople for our school district. You have a teacher go out and say one bad thing or inaccurate thing, wildfire. And that's where we can communicate and we can talk and we can make sure that doesn't happen. If there's an issue, let's talk about it, let's get it solved, and we can do that. Recruiting teachers. I want the best and brightest here.
Thank you.
Okay, any follow-up? All right, number 15, Mr. Steve.
Describe a school wellness program and what you know about implementing one.
I know very little about a wellness program. We had the wellness policy, and where I'm from, that has to do with nutrition and exercise and being able to provide your adults in the building with readings and whether it be you get a group up that will walk 3 days a week. The nutrition standards, that's part of wellness as well, but I'm not so sure that the Hungry Child Schools Act of 2010 is doing what it was designed to do. I don't have a lot of background in wellness, just to be honest with you. I need to walk more. I need to exercise more.
Yeah, are you familiar with setting up a wellness policy, or did your schools have recess for the elementary schools, or a breakfast program?
Well, we've had breakfast programs, recess programs, no. Probably need to learn a little more about wellness program. What is here? What is here in terms of a wellness program?
Well, we've got a breakfast program. We haven't had it about 3 or 4 years, but that was one of the things in a wellness policy tool. That do you have daily recess? Do you have a breakfast program? Those are just 2 things, but you can build from there.
Sure.
So I was just,
Sure.
that's what I wanted to ask you about.
Could you talk a little bit about your teacher cadet program?
Teacher cadet program at the high school was run by a teacher who obviously has a relationship with students, and they go to the primary and elementary school several times a week to serve as tutors and help and to learn more about being a teacher. We had a good relationship with Lander University in South Carolina, and we would have, just like you all have, not interns, but they're doing observations. I love those students. I love student teachers to be able to get the energy, the innovative, creative stuff from those young people into the schools. It's also free work, so I love them.
Any other follow-up there? I'm not sure that was a follow-up, but it was, we'll do 21, okay. All right, Mike, you're good?
Yeah, as you are aware, we're at the high school today. We don't have a middle school, which means 7th and 8th grade students are at the high school. Given our limited facilities in this area, to what extent would you separate middle school aged students from high school students, and why?
The answer to that is absolutely. I spent enough time around middle school students to understand their minds. I also understand senior boys and 7th grade girls, and to keep those separated solves lots of problems. I think you also are going to be able to satisfy our parents to understand that their 7th grade child is not going to be around the older boys, and I think that's something we need to be proactive in, making sure that they're separated. Now, they may ride the bus together, and they may eat breakfast when they come in. I would guess they're going to go to a ball game together, but underneath our roof, we need to supervise appropriately, and I don't think that they need to commingle throughout the day. Just solves a lot of problems. And there may be some exceptions, you have to share a teacher or something, but for the most part.
Thank you.
Any follow-up? Okay. Number 17 is mine. What strategies would you employ to increase enrollment, and what are your thoughts on open enrollment?
In my opinion, having the best school system around will draw students. In our little school system, we had 350 out of the 1,600 students that came from outside of our district. And they weren't, let's just face it, what they were. They were cream of the crop from surrounding school districts. And so that was a benefit for us and benefit for our teachers. Having the best school system will draw. Having employees with a great work environment is going to draw. I mentioned earlier about our employees being the best PR we've got. If they have good working conditions and they have great administration and they have collaboration, they don't live in a gotcha world, they're going to talk well about the school district. And their children go to school there, so I think that will help. I said earlier, our employees are the best PR money can buy, I think. And yes, I like open enrollment. I think that we need to be able to gather more students, so long as there are contingencies, whether it be behavior, academic, or whatever. We're just not going to take folks that get expelled from somewhere else or have had numerous discipline issues somewhere else. They just don't need to come here.
On your open enrollment view, did you charge for these students that came from out of district or out of your area?
We have two different groups of students. We have those that were out of district and out of county. We have 3 school districts in our county. If they were out of county, they had to pay tuition. Very minimal cost tuition, $500 I think is what it was. But if they were out of district and still in the county, there was no tuition. In this particular, excuse me.
Transportation, did they have to provide their own transportation?
Their own transportation, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have one follow-up. Do you have any thoughts of how charter schools are going to affect Alabama regarding student choice? Probably should have been a separate question, but.
You know, there's been a lot of misinformation about charter schools. But I will tell you from the YouTube that I have watched, I wonder who that was. When this board discussed that, brought some things to mind that I really hadn't thought about. Charter schools are supposed to meet a need. And if we're providing that need, is not a need to be able to have charter schools. What about magnet-type schools? I mean, I think we as a district can provide some kind of magnet kind of school situation, whether it be the arts or technology or whatever, music. Frankly, I'm not interested in charter situation, and I think that befuddles our role as public school educators. I know that's public, but this is public. But my eyes were opened up when I listened to that. I don't think that there's a need for charter schools in this district.
Thank you. Okay.
I do have a follow-up on the enrollment. In your recent stint as superintendent, one of the things you mentioned as an accomplishment you had was increased enrollment. Other than being a great school system, what is there something else you can point to probably led to that?
I think our test scores, was one of the pieces. I think they have some different recognition in South Carolina. They had Palmetto Gold, Palmetto Silver. We were a national blue ribbon school at high school. Our facilities, we had built a couple of schools, and we built a track and a concession stand, press box, and just some of those things that some of the other folks didn't have, in addition to the academic piece. They were knocking on the door to come in.
Okay, you're up next.
Providing all stakeholders with necessary and appropriate information regarding matters of the school system is critical. What are some examples of specific strategies you've used to promote public support of school activities? budget, instructional programs.
You know, I hate to say it, but one of the best and worst things that's ever been created is Facebook.
Could you repeat that one more time, please?
You want me to do it louder?
Please.
Facebook has its own place, but it has to be done appropriately. I was the caretaker of the Facebook page in the Greenwood School District. They would send stuff to me, and I would post the positive and good stuff that was there. But that's not the only place that parents look. There are other places. You've got your web page, you've got Twitter, you've got whatever the case might be. We have to do a better job of promoting the good things that go on in the school district. And that was my goal the last year I was there, is to promote the good things that were happening. There were so many good things that were going on that weren't being promoted. And so, what is it they say? The old statement that says is if you don't promote your own school, I'll get it in a minute. If you can't or won't promote your own situation, somebody else is going to use it for a spittoon. And so we make our own PR. And so we've got to do a better job of that. And I was guilty of, I won't say neglecting it, but there were so many other things, hats that we had to wear that, you know, it wasn't picked up and it wasn't delegated. So I made it a point to myself that I was going to do it. And if you take a look at our Greenwood 52 Facebook page and go back, you'll see the promotion that we did. So the best and the worst thing. If I can add some other stuff, we put budgets on our webpage, strategic plans. My evaluations were on the webpage, balanced scorecards were there. We've done surveys on there. I've done monthly meetings for parents, quarterly meetings for community members. I'd like to do once a month drop-ins, Saturday morning coffees. Whatever we decide to do, I want to be able to do a lot on the front end. I need to be able to earn the trust, develop those relationships.
Okay, any follow-up? All right, number 19, Steve.
To what degree do you believe responsibilities can and should be delegated to principals, and provide examples of how you hold them accountable for accomplishing those responsibilities?
I think principals are responsible for everything that happens in their building. They're responsible for all of the employees, all of the students, excuse me. And again, that's going back to building relationships and knowing those people, trusting those people, and have that trust both ways. It took the longest time to get our principals to understand that the nutrition department was in their building. That's always been kind of a separate entity, and they didn't want to worry with the workers and the substitutes and that kind of stuff, but that's in your building. You need to know what's going on. What happened if you had some heart attacks in the back, or somebody broke in the back and somebody was hurt? How do you know who and what and where and when? Having been a principal for many years, I understand what that means when you're responsible for everything in the building. If you have a student that runs from the building, you're responsible. You're responsible for the lunchroom. You're responsible for the parent meetings that have to take place. You're responsible for the IEPs. Being a principal is a tough job. Been there and done that. But it can be done. It can be done very well. You've got to be able to delegate some pieces. You've got to have trust in those people. I think you need to develop teacher leaders to be able to help with some of these responsibilities. You know, I remember when I first started teaching school, that was about all I did was teach. Nowadays, there's so many more responsibilities. Can I get an amen from the teachers? Mm-hmm. It's tough, and we need to be able to support them in their efforts. Delegate some, use your teacher leaders. What about your parents coming in to do some survey work or do some bulletin board stuff? Just be able to have some help. What about your intern teachers? What about, some of those kind of folks? So let's get some help. And yeah, we hold them accountable. When I get the call, so-and-so at school did this. And so I go and ask the question, share this information with me. And so we get that. If it's not the same, then we've got another issue to deal with. Everything's above board. There's nothing under my rug in my office. If it comes to my door, I deal with it.
I don't have a follow-up to that, but there was, in your packet, you mentioned, I think in the last year or maybe the last couple of years, that you were in the process or have developed an IB curriculum at your school. Can you talk about that?
About 7 years ago, we did, and we were authorized as an IB school at primary level. We've had some board shuffles in the past year. And they didn't know whether or not they were getting the bang for the buck. It's a very expensive program. Whether they were getting the bang for the buck for the money they were spending for professional development. And so we withdrew from the IB program after 7 years of implementation. We were working on getting our elementary school IB. I think the money issue was the greatest issue. And maybe we didn't share enough of the results and how that was working. So IB is inquiry.
Is what? Sorry.
Inquiry. And so we just basically changed it to an inquiry kind of curriculum instead of IB. We can ride that horse a couple of different ways. And I think it's going to hurt us some because the companies that are coming in from outside of the United States and building companies in our community that are used to International Baccalaureate. And so that's the first thing they ask for. Who's got International Baccalaureate around here? So I think it's going to hurt us a little bit.
So in your opinion, the implementation of that was working, you were pleased with the results, and you felt the value was there?
Yes. And again, you're looking at primary school, so you're looking at down the road as well. So still a future kind of project, but I thought it was well worthwhile.
Thank you.
Okay, any follow-up to 19? We're at our
Okay.
favorite number now.
Number 20.
Ms. Kelly?
Okay, there's a couple of parts, but the first is, we have 6 quality finalists for this position. Why should this board select you?
I think there are a lot of reasons. And these aren't necessarily in priority order. I've got 14 years successful experience as a superintendent in 3 different districts, 2 of them very similar to Jacksonville City. I've been a principal or assistant principal for 12 years. I've taught at the elementary school and at the high school, so I've got some credibility in terms of what I've done and some of the accomplishments that have happened. I'm an adjunct at Piedmont College in Demorest for several years, so that kind of relate to where do we go from high school. We instituted a middle college. I've been in the school business for 36 years. I've got at least 10, if not 15 years left of passion for boys and girls to be able to make a difference. My life is the school system. I really don't have any hobbies. I got my golf clubs that were in my office, but I used them for 9 holes in 6 years. Why is that? Well, there's probably several reasons, but to me it didn't matter. When the doors opened for ball games, I was there. Chorus concerts, I was there. Band programs, I was there. I do a lot of driving a school bus for school activities because I've got a CDL and I've saved the district money, and it's a way for me to get to the activity, and I get to be around kids. So that's a benefit for me. So I've got the energy to, I know what needs to be done. I've got the initiative to get it done. And I can hold those accountable for doing what needs to be done.
Okay, last part. As superintendent, how important would it be for you to live in Jacksonville?
Imperative. I need to be here. I need to pay taxes here. I need to go to church here. I need to go to the grocery store here. I need to go to some football games up at JSU. Volleyball games, I need to do that as well. But no, I need to be here. And every place that we've gone, it seems, as you look at my resume, that I've been a lot of things and done a lot of things and been a lot of places, and that's absolutely true. I don't have any children. I've got a year-and-a-half-old bulldog. That's my child. But the school district is my hobby. I don't know how else to describe it. And I guess the last reason that you need to hire me is that I'm available. Where do I sign? I can come tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you. Oh, are you good? I'm sorry.
I'd like to be the face of this district.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the 20 questions that you've received ahead of time, and we wanted to allow some time if you want to ask us some questions. I
will tell you, I've had a great day today. Mr. Neighbors gave me a tour and dropped me off at both schools, and we met a lot of folks that are in the audience I've met. I saw a lot of great things. Made me very happy to know that this district is where I'm wanting to go and where I'm wanting to head. There's quality here. The results are very obvious. But when you talk to the teachers and how they interact with students, very, very positive. You see the children are behaving, they're walking like they're supposed to, they're not running and fighting and throwing and that kind of stuff. But there are school systems that allow them to do that. And I'm tickled that that's not the case here. We had lunch at the high school, much better lunch than I had anticipated because I've eaten lunches for a long time. As a matter of fact, I stopped eating school lunches and I lost a bunch of weight. But it was good. I enjoyed that. Met a lot of people. Pep rally was outstanding today. That's my arena. I need to be there. And that's what I'll do if I get to come to Jacksonville. I'll be in the midst of what's happening in the district. And I appreciate the opportunity to come. I don't know how that camera's going to do, but I've enjoyed my stay today. Sure do. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you coming, and just logistically, we've got a timeline for making a decision by October the 19th, and so we'll be in touch with you, after that, and we will be checking references and doing those things that you always do when you're interviewing folks, and so if you have any questions in the meantime, you have my number and Mr. Neighbors' number, and you can give us a call.
Sure do. Okay.
But we appreciate you coming, and
thank you for the opportunity.
Very, very nice to meet you.
It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes our meeting for tonight.